Welcome to Safer Communities Through Racial Justice, a coordinated virtual action. This is Amy from the Community Health Planning and Policy Development section of APHA, or CHPPD for short, and also Drexel School of Public Health in Philadelphia. I'll be one of your hosts today. As we get started, please share your name, your organization, and where you're joining from in the chat of whatever platform you're using. We want to see where you're coming from. Okay, we'll give a minute for folks to add to the chat. And I'll just give you a little bit of background. So today is the 10th annual day of action during the American Public Health Association, or APHA, annual meeting, led by the CHPPD section. The purpose of the Day of Action is to get APHA members out of the convention center and contributing to local communities in the host city each year by working with local community-based organizations to shine the spotlight of our national, global public health workforce on a pressing public health issue or policy opportunity. Since APHA was supposed to happen in San Francisco, and the theme of the conference is on preventing violence, we couldn't think of any better partner than the Prevention Institute, who has long been a leader in community-based and national-supported violence prevention efforts, which is why some of today's actions relate to efforts in California. We've also invited speakers from other parts of the country, and we'll be emphasizing best practices and actions throughout the event that you can take in your own community wherever you are. We've created an action toolkit that you can use today to take action on important campaigns and also use long-term to stay engaged in building safer communities through racial justice. And now I would like to hand it over to Lisa from Prevention Institute. Lisa?
Thank you so much, Amy. And hi, everyone. This is Lisa Fujia Parks. I'm with Prevention Institute, and I'm also hosting today's session. I want to give a shout out to our safety and well-being team, our health equity and racial justice team, our policy team, our communications team. A huge thank you to Amy and Sam and many volunteers and all of our speakers and co-sponsors who are helping to make today happen. And I want to give a giant debt of gratitude to the hundreds and thousands of African-American leaders and other leaders of color who have, risking their lives, led our country to this moment of resistance and transformation, and the millions of people who are rising up with their leadership, generations in the making. This session is rooted in the understanding that we build safe communities not through punishment or detainment or incarceration, but through justice and equity, through ensuring that everyone's needs are met, that their fundamental needs and rights are met, and through transforming structural racism and all forms of oppression. I know that my safety requires the undoing of the illusion of white supremacy and all forms of supremacy. I know that all of our safety rests on that. So much is at stake right now. So much is at stake. And so I'm so grateful, honored, delighted to be gathered with you today to listen and learn and take collective action. We have an amazing assemblage of some of the most incredible organizers and leaders doing transformative work in their communities, and we get to learn about them and take action in support of those campaigns. So here's how we want you to engage on Zoom and the other platforms. We're going to ask you to comment on questions. We're going to ask you to ask questions to our speakers on whatever platform you're using. We're going to periodically ask you to take action, like signing up on a website or posting something on social media. So these actions you're going to see on your platform noted with *** action. That's a way that we can really amplify the great work that these organizers are leading. So if you're on Zoom only, you can post comments in the chat, but go ahead if you have the ability, get on your Twitter account, get on your other social media and post with our hashtag #VirtualAction2020. If you're on Facebook, you can post questions, comments, and responses on the live stream chat. and on YouTube, the same. And we encourage people to share and post widely on other social media platforms as well. So now we want to ask you a question. What is on your mind? Why do you think racial justice is necessary for building safer communities? So go ahead, folks who are hosting on the various platforms, please go ahead and post that question in the chat. Why is racial justice necessary for building safer communities? And while you're sharing your thoughts, I am delighted to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Howard Pinderhughes. Great to see you, Howard. Thanks for joining. Howard is, among many other things, a professor of social behavioral sciences at the University of California, San Francisco, and a council member of one of the coolest organizations I can imagine, the Brotherhood of Elders Network. I hope I get to join a network like that someday. So Howard, today is about creating safety through racial justice. Help shape and frame this question. Why is racial justice necessary for community safety?
Well, Lisa, I think you pointed to the fact that we're at a really pivotal time in history, where the mechanisms and systems of oppression and of structural violence have become more clear to more people in our society than we have in recent memory. And obviously the movements for racial justice that have been in the streets around the police killings of Black and brown people, men and women around the country, has been a key part of that. But also the impact, the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on Black, brown, and Native peoples across our country has laid bare what some of the primary sources of danger, of violence, and of harm, and of injury, and of death are in our most vulnerable communities. And for a long time, our politics has been dominated by this narrative that safer communities come from policing and control of poor communities. And we've come to understand over the last 40 to 50 years, based on the movements for racial justice, that a different way is necessary to create safety in our communities. I got involved in this work because I grew up in Roxbury, Massachusetts. And I remember back in 1967, when riots broke out in Roxbury because a woman was in line at the welfare office trying to get public assistance and was brutalized by the police. And from that day forward, I've had a clear understanding of the way forward in terms of making Roxbury and other communities like that, like here in Oakland, where I live, make them safer is to improve community networks, to improve community structures, to improve community environments, and reduce the elements of control and oppression that come from state apparatus such as the police. The police have a role, but the problem we are faced with now is understanding what role that is and understanding what role it is not. And so right now, the most important message that we can put forward is that community safety comes through establishing racial justice, establishing changing our systems of education, changing our systems of public control, changing our systems across the board to create equity and inclusion through all of those systems, and create trauma-informed systems that don't inflict harm and inflict injury and death, but help to promote health and well-being in all communities. And healthy communities are safe communities.
Thank you so much for articulating that so clearly. Howard, I appreciate you staying on for the rest of the session and all the ways that we get to partner in this work. But appreciate you sharing that message that this is the most important message to put out, that safety is created through racial justice. So let's hear what folks are saying. Ruben and Sam, who are helping to gather all the input from our various platforms, if you don't mind joining and letting us know, what are you seeing on the platforms? Where are people participating from, and what are they saying about what creates safety through, or why safety is, why racial justice is necessary for community safety?
Thanks, Lisa. This is Ruben. I'll share a little bit. I've seen folks popping up in the chat from across the country. We've got a lot of folks in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, South Carolina, West Virginia, Virginia. We've got people in the Midwest and the Great Lakes. We've got folks from Wisconsin and from Milwaukee, from Chicago, Indiana. And then we've got a lot of folks on the West Coast as well, all through the Bay Area, Berkeley, San Francisco, Oakland, down in Los Angeles. So it's great to see kind of a wide range of folks, folks up in rural New Hampshire as well. So we've got a great turnout of folks from across the country. And in terms of what people are saying about why racial justice is necessary for building safer communities, we've had a couple of comments from folks saying that, you know, it's important to acknowledge and change systemic racism because we'll never address the root causes of community violence otherwise. So much of our violence, that we're seeing is really rooted in racism. And unless we kind of get to that root and address that, we're always going to be dealing with the same issues. We had a really great comment from someone, decolonizing the structures that our communities were built on is critical if we want to build more equitable communities. So some really great comments and some really great feedback we're seeing from folks in the chat so far.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ruben. And I hope things are getting going on Twitter and Facebook and the other platforms as well. Once again, if you're just joining us, we're going to have lots of opportunities for taking action in support of some really important campaigns that are happening right now. And the arc of this session, we're first going to start on kind of immediate and short-term campaigns, starting with efforts to get out the vote. And then we know this work needs to be sustained over the long haul. So we're going to get the opportunity to learn about longer-term campaigns and ways that to stay engaged over the long haul. So we are going to start by learning about some efforts to get out the vote. So it is my pleasure and honor to introduce Greg Jackson Jr., National Advocacy Director with Community Justice Action Fund, and Sari Billick, Senior Public Health Organizer at Human Impact Partners and Coordinator of Public Health Awakened. Greg and Sari, thank you so much for joining. Lovely to see you there. I'm so excited to hear about your campaigns. We know that civic engagement, you see my sign in the back, voting in the election is probably one of the most important and powerful ways we can support safer communities through racial justice. So Greg, tell us about your Elect Justice campaign and why folks should get involved between now and November 3rd. And while you're sharing, we'll go ahead and put the links to your beautiful websites. So what is the Elect Justice campaign and why is it important that we get involved?
Yes, well, thanks for having me again, and good evening, everybody. Good afternoon if you're on the, depending on which coast you're in. But I'm Greg Jackson, the Advocacy Director for the Community Justice Action Fund. I come to this work from a very personal space. In 2013, I became a survivor of gun violence. And in that time, started to become an activist by sharing my story, but then also working in local government to address gun violence, and really learned very fast how many issues surround this crisis of gun violence beyond just the physical hardware of whether or not someone had the firearm. And so I started working on different gun violence prevention strategies, a lot of the community-based solutions that I'm sure a lot of you have heard about or hear more about through this experience. And so excited to be here. Community Justice Action Fund, we are focused on ending gun violence by advancing policy that prioritizes community-based solutions to address gun violence. And one big thing we found, especially this year, when we were fighting these big policy battles around police violence, around stand your ground laws, and around this big spike in gun violence that we're seeing across the country, was that we found a lot of politicians kind of retreating to their base and focusing on their base of voters and what their voters wanted to see, and not necessarily prioritizing policy that would help everyone, or frankly, help the communities that we were fighting for. And so we decided we need to change that, and not just by changing the policy and changing the lawmakers, but also strengthening the communities that are advocating for policy change electorally. And so we joined with a conglomerate of organizations, but primarily Revolve Impact and Impact Strategies that are both based in LA, and launched a campaign called Elect Justice. The Elect Justice campaign, we're in 3 states, California, Texas, and Wisconsin. California, we're running a much larger social media influencer-oriented program. We were able to register Snoop Dogg to vote for the first time, and he voted on Saturday, which was pretty cool for our program. We were able to get just a lot of different major influencers, Maya Moore from the WNBA, Maxine Waters, just a lot of different champions to jump into the fight and really fight around voting and the importance of allowing the communities that are most impacted by the failure of government to be at the front of the line when it came to voting time. So that's been really amazing. In Texas and Wisconsin, we built political coalitions. In Wisconsin, we focused on a lot of the organizers that responded to the shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, and then also organized in Milwaukee and Madison. And then in Texas, there obviously has been a big growing movement of progressive voters, but we've also seen a big shift in leadership and the local leadership's approach to addressing gun violence. In Austin, Texas, for example, they introduced the first Office of Violence Prevention, and we played a big role in that. And so in Texas, we've been partnering specifically with the community groups there. And what we've been doing is doing targeted voter outreach to the actual precincts and communities that are most impacted by gun violence and mass incarceration. And so just to be a little bit more frank about it, we'll look at a city like Milwaukee, look at the different communities that are being terrorized by gun violence and destroyed by gun violence, and we rank those precincts. Then from there, we turned around and figured out, okay, who are the first time voters in those precincts? Who are the sporadic voters? How do we target them to help increase their voter turnout? And then who are the civically active and champion and very engaged voters in those same precincts? And how do we help build their political strength and turn them into volunteers to hopefully help improve the voter turnout? And so this targeted program we're doing in these 3 states for this year has been pretty amazing. We've already reached 340,000 voters. We had a really big event on Saturday with just a lot of amazing artists. If you all use streaming services, you should all be using Tidal, not Apple Music or Spotify. But if you're on Tidal, if you go in the home screen, I don't know if y'all can see this, but like our event is at the top as soon as you log in, and you can click in and you can watch our big event with Snoop Dogg and a lot of other guests on Saturday. So I'm really excited about it, this influencer cultural engagement side, but then also excited about our direct voter contact side. One thing I will share is specifically in Texas and Wisconsin, right now we are trying to call and text as many voters as we can, and we need volunteers. So I'm sure you'll hear about this in a second, but if you go to electjustice.org or you go directly to the mobilize.us/electjustice, it will show you all of the opportunities to volunteer. We need people to make phone calls. We need people to send text messages. You can do it all from your home. You can do it all while you're watching TV, your favorite Netflix or whatever. But we really could use your help here in the last 8 days before the election. So that's just a broad overview of what we're doing, but just building political power in the same neighborhoods that are being negatively impacted by gun violence, so that in January, when this new leadership comes in, they are the new base. And hopefully one day they'll be the new candidates and the new elected officials and the new policymakers that can help us turn the tide on this crisis. So thank you.
I love this so much. I love that you're using both kind of grassroots community organizing, cultural strategy, power building, electoral strategy. I love a precise strategy, how you're really being very precise about who you're engaging and how you're engaging. And I love that you're inviting us to be a part of that effort. So hopefully everybody participating, you can see the website. If I was not hosting, I would be signing up right now, because I can't imagine many other, anything almost more important to do than to really focus on getting out the vote for this election. So, but I hope many of you participating today are going to sign up. And also, please go ahead and forward that social media message that we have pushed out to you all. It should say action, *** action. And just remember to delete *** action before you forward the message. So just delete that part and then post the rest of the message in your social media. Help get the word out about this amazing campaign and get more volunteers to participate between now and November 3rd. But what I love is that you have that long-term vision of how everything that we're doing now is just going to build for the days and years to come. So thank you so much, Greg. And so next let's hear from Sari, who's going to tell us about a campaign called Defend the Vote for Public Health and ways that health departments can help ensure healthy voting. So yeah, Sari, please tell us about the campaign.
Great, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm in California, so it is still afternoon. So this year, in the middle of a pandemic and with so much at stake, we know that it's going to be critical that every voter is able to access the polls, to show up safely to vote, and that their vote is counted. We know that electoral politics is not the only path to liberation and health justice, but we also know that voting can shape the terrain on which we can continue to push and make concrete shifts in the structural and social determinants of health. We know that access to voting is critical for health equity. So as we've seen, voter suppression tactics are ramping up, including deliberate sabotaging of the US Postal Service. We believe we can't allow this fought for right to be further eroded more than it already has been for centuries, especially for Black and Indigenous people and people of color. As public health workers, we can take collective action to demand change, to defend the right to vote, and to ensure the safety and integrity of the upcoming election. So through Public Health Awakened, which is our national network, Human Impact Partners has launched a campaign called Defend the Vote for Public Health to sign up public health workers to engage in election work, everything from sharing voting information with your networks to committing to be a poll worker or an election monitor on election day. Health departments also have a role to play in ensuring access to voting and healthy voting. We put together a resource, which is in the toolkit that you can find, that outlines 5 different actions health departments can take. So that includes leveraging resources, people, and space, highlighting the importance of voting for health equity, disseminating guidance about healthy and safe voting, supporting voting in local jails, and then working to address the root causes of inequities before and also after elections. There's more details on all of that in our guide. And we also know that this work won't end on November 3rd. With so many people voting by mail this year and with the possibility of a contested election, it's very likely that we're not going to know election results by the end of election day. So we're going to continue to defend the vote for public health by doing all that we can to ensure that every vote in every state is counted. And well beyond this election season, we're going to continue to fight for voter rights, from expanding voting access in communities that have been disenfranchised to restoring the right to vote for people who have been denied their voting rights.
Thank you so much for just making all the ways that health departments can participate, why it's so important, and all the ways that they could do that so explicit and clear and easy, and creating these toolkits. And what is something that folks who are participating today can do right now?
Yeah, 2 really quick things. So we're asking everyone who's able to take the day off work on election day and sign up to be an election monitor. And there's both in-person and remote roles across the country. Election monitoring is really critical to making sure that everyone's able to safely access the polls. As we've seen in the primaries and past elections, voters are going to face challenges being able to cast their votes. And these obstacles, which will hit already disenfranchised communities the hardest, threaten our democracy. And so if you go to protectthevote.net, you can sign up right there to be an election monitor, and they'll send you all the information and give you training and everything that you need. This could include watching polls, staffing hotlines, and doing everything that we can to ensure that every voter has an equal opportunity to vote. And then we're also asking folks to just spread the word and get more folks to sign up to be election monitors. And so we have some sample social media, which I think will be in the chat, that you can post to encourage more folks to sign up. You can also just stay involved in our campaign, and we'll give you updates by signing up on our website. If you go to publichealthawaken.org/election2020, all the information, including that health department resource that I mentioned, is up there.
Thank you so much, Sari, again, for just creating these campaigns that we can all plug into. And so you can hopefully see, if you're participating by Zoom or Facebook or YouTube, that we have another action that you can take right now. Just remember to delete the *** action and then push that out into your social media, whether that be Twitter or on your Facebook page or your organization's Facebook page, or on other platforms like Instagram. And so just to recap, there are several actions that we want you to be taking right now, because this is coordinated virtual action. You're getting the opportunity to learn and to take action in live time, in real time. So while I'm talking, you can copy and paste the social media posts that we've shared with you, and just go ahead and shoot those out onto your social media, or you can also retweet or repost the things that other people have shared. And you also have the opportunity to visit some of those websites and get to sign up to be a monitor, or to do phone banking, to be a part of these great campaigns that Greg and Sari have shared. So hope you are doing that right now. And if you're not, go ahead and get started. So voting, it's so important, and civic engagement now and past November 3rd. Now we're going to talk about some specific campaigns that are focused on investing in schools and communities instead of punishment. So Greg, I understand you have a campaign called Schools, Not Prisons. And if you could tell us what you are trying to accomplish there.
Yes. So the Schools Not Prisons effort, it's a collaborative effort with Revolve Impact, which is one of our key partners on the West Coast. And it's pretty straightforward. I think it's a really good name. Schools Not Prisons, but where we advocate for more funding to be redirected from our criminal justice system and the levers that fuel mass incarceration, and more focus in education and proactive solutions to address violence in our communities. The message is pretty simple, but what makes it really exciting is just the lineup of supporters we've had. Again, Revolve Impact is our partner on it. They're the lead, but they've been able to get really big artists like Miguel, John Forte, even Aloe Black, Vic Menza, and they've done typically in-person concerts around the country to bring awareness around this issue, but most importantly, to bring awareness around the budget process and where dollars are flowing, where tax dollars are flowing in different communities. So we're excited about it. We actually are finishing up now. We did a digital tour. It was a Schools Not Prisons, Stop the Violence tour that we're closing out now, where we traveled to digitally different states, kind of uplifted the local musical artists and then some of the national artists and influencers and what this issue means for them, but then also highlighted ways for people to take action. And so I don't know if there's folks on here from Chicago, but in Chicago, there's a genre of rap music called drill music. So the godfather of drill music was on it. We had a Houston event. We actually brought in Trade of Truth, which is one of the originators of chop and screw rap music, which is pretty awesome. And so we try to bring together just really localized trendsetters from a musical side, and then combine them with the local grassroots organizations like Pure Justice in Houston, or Urban Triage in Madison, Wisconsin, and just elevate the issue, elevate the solutions that exist, and hopefully create a bridge between entertainment and action that can be taken. And so it's pretty exciting. You can go to schoolsnotprisons.org and you can see our last few events that we've done. I believe our Chicago one is up there now, and you probably can also see Milwaukee. But they're also like really, really good, good events and good production for you to just enjoy and watch. And I know we all have probably binge watched everything on Netflix. So this will give you something fresh to check out and to learn more about some of the regional challenges communities are facing.
Yeah, how wonderful to create joy and connection and just goodness as you are mobilizing widely and raising awareness about these issues and lifting up, like you said, the local solutions that already exist and the types of solutions that we should be investing in, right? Massively investing in because we know that they work. So along those lines of, the need to invest, we can't disinvest in communities and exploit communities and expect safety and thriving to occur. We need to invest and invest equitably. And thanks for coming back, Sari, to tell us about a really important proposition that we have going on in California right now called Prop 15, Schools and Communities First, another good name. So Sari, tell us about this proposition, what it would do to invest in schools and communities, and why people even outside of California might be interested in this proposition and helping to get it passed.
Great, thank you. So we know that our tax structure and our budgets are critical components of building an inclusive and healthy society, and the decisions we make about taxes make concrete the things that we value. So in the national conversation around divestment from systems that cause harm to our communities, police, jails, prisons, detention centers, it's critical, as Lisa said, that we're also talking about concrete solutions to invest in health, education, community safety, and the well-being of our communities. So in California, we have an opportunity to do just that through a statewide ballot measure, Proposition 15, also referred to as the Schools and Communities First Initiative. Prop 15 would close a commercial property tax loophole that's been allowing corporations to avoid paying their fair share in taxes for the past 42 years. Wealthy corporations in California, companies like Disney and Chevron, have paid very little in property taxes for years, with the values of their properties and their profits have been soaring. This has led to decades of California schools and public services being massively underfunded. This underfunding of our communities and our public health infrastructure has left many communities much more vulnerable to COVID-19, as well as the economic impacts of the pandemic. If passed, Proposition 15 will generate $12 billion per year, which will be directly invested in K-12 schools, in community colleges, and in our local communities. In our communities, this funding can be used to fill gaps left by the pandemic and economic crisis. It can provide affordable housing, childcare, and mental health services, and it could cover the cost of healthcare at community clinics, as well as much more. So we know that we have the power to change our tax systems so that we can all thrive. Across the country, we need to get better at demanding policies that move us forward, and at the same time, correct structural inequities enshrined in past policy decisions. So Prop 15 is one opportunity to do that here in California next week on Election Day. And hopefully we can see similar things happening across the country soon.
Excellent. I love a solution that both corrects an inequity and in doing so just generates really, really critical resources for the kinds of things that we know are so needed right now. So this is a really important ballot. I'm so excited that it's happening. We want to really get out the vote in California and make sure that people are voting for Prop 15. So what is the action that you would like us to take now, Sari, in support of Prop 15?
Yeah, great. We're seeing large corporations pouring funding into attack ads attack ads of the campaign and trying to confuse voters. So what we're really asking is that you post on your social media right now to spread the word about the Yes on Prop 15 campaign. And we're asking that even folks outside of California post as well. So there's some sample social media that you can post as well as images if you want to. But if you're in California, please post. And if you're not, please spread the word as well. And then the other thing is that if you are in California, and really if you're not in California, you're welcome to as well. But if you're in California, we're asking folks to join a phone bank to get out the vote for Prop 15 in the next week. So there's several times throughout the week that you can join. And if you join the phone bank, you'll be trained, you'll be given a script to call voters. It's from your house, it's all virtual. And so we'll share the link as well to sign up to make calls to get out the vote for Prop 15. Thanks.
Excellent. So folks, I have another opportunity to post on social media. Now, again, if I were not hosting, I would be posting right now. And in fact, I may try to do it while I'm hosting, because I know that we're asking you to do two things. We're asking you to listen and learn, and we are also asking you to take action. So I want to give you that reminder and encouragement, and maybe just a little space. I'm talking slowly so you can have the space to open your browser, go to your account, and copy and paste those messages, and go ahead and push send. It's an incredible feeling to be a part of these important campaigns, to lift up this great work, to get behind these campaigns. And so again, you'll see our action, star action. Just go ahead and follow the action, or if it says it's asking you to post something on social media, just delete the star action, and you can copy and paste that message right then and there. So thank you so much. Hopefully folks are starting to post on social media. I think I saw a message just pop up that someone signed up for your phone bank, Greg. So that's awesome. We're starting to see people joining these campaigns. It's wonderful. So I would like to invite another speaker to join our conversation now. This conversation that's focused on investing in schools and communities and not punishment, and what that looks like on the ground and long term. So I want to invite Kanwarpal Dhaliwal, who is the Associate Director of the Rise Youth Center in Richmond, California. Hello, Kanwarpal. Very nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining. I'm a huge fan of Rise. Rise is a place that creates safe spaces grounded in social justice for young people to love and learn and educate and heal and transform lives and communities. So good, so good. So we've been talking about campaigns, we've been talking about voting, we've been talking about changing what we invest in. And we know that, you know, this notion of really undoing the illusion of white supremacy and supremacy of all kinds, and creating safety in our communities takes more than all of those things, right? So tell us what you do, what you learn, and what we should know about from your perspective, working with young people, and the kinds of actions that we should be taking to create safety through racial justice.
Thank you, Lisa. It's great to be here. Great to be amongst all these little windows on Zoom with all the panelists and hosts, and to see the 108 folks in the participant list as well. So what a great way to be here on Monday afternoon. And what I want to start with is actually sharing two quotes from some of our young folks at Rise. So the first one is, realizing institutions don't work for you, but against you is the first step to healing your community. And the second one, healing looks like education. If people understood their privilege and how their actions can deeply affect someone, I think it would help a lot of people who are struggling with these issues. And I share these to really sort of then be able to talk about how we sort of enter into and engage our work, and all of the actions that have been previously shared. I want to thank and acknowledge our partners for moving those. I can proudly say Rise is also engaged in all these actions. We're a proud Prop 15 Schools and Community First advocate and partner. But what I also know is that in this moment upon moments, especially in 2020, what we've come to understand as a racial justice organization is we have to double and triple down in what we've always been doing, and we have to continue to lift it up. So I'm gonna offer some frameworks and ways for us to rethink, think, do, undo how we're in this work. And so what I would sort of offer as our understanding is that white supremacy is the public health crisis. And it is also white supremacy that is embedded in all our systems, including our public health systems. And we have to hold both of those things as partners, stakeholders, advocates, et cetera. And that I think that this is exactly the right time for public health to do some reckoning around our role in empire building, in over surveilling, in policing, and honestly in over empathizing and normalizing whiteness. I think there's so much to do around action, and we're not going to negate action. RISE was built out of the actions of young people of color organizing. But what we also know is day in, day out, what matters is the relationship. So if our actions aren't building loving relationships, powerful relationships, righteous relationships, then our systems can't be that either. And so that is really our work. So I want to offer some things for us to think about as we move through the rest of the afternoon and through our work and through our legacy and movement building. And that is that for our Black kin, for folks of color, that we have to remember that resilience is our baseline. And this is where I feel like public health, has to be really careful with how we talk about resilience, because it's assumed as a benchmark and we actually have nothing to prove. We're not supposed to be here. We're not supposed to be celebrating. We're not supposed to have joy. We're not supposed to survive. Certainly not supposed to have agency. And I do feel like what I want to see us do as a field and connected systems is that we stop asserting resilience as a benchmark. If anyone needs to build their resilience, I would offer it for our white kin to build your resilience and fortitude to rupture the systems that unduly protect you. I would also offer and want to share that for our non-Black kin of color, myself certainly in that, is that we also have to relinquish the energy of anti-Blackness that we exert in trying to approximate whiteness. I know as a firstborn child of immigrants, firstborn in the United States, that what is our success is our proximity to whiteness. That has been how the state has defined our value and our worth, or deemed whether or not we should be here. And we have to resist that and rupture that, because trying to be white will never happen. It will never work. And what will heal is our solidarity. I also want to offer just some things around how we do the work. And that is, we spend a lot of time and investments in evaluating and surveilling behaviors and individuals. We have to shift to actually evaluate the systems that are responsible for and in servitude to us and our communities. Liberation is not a logic model. And if we're only changing behaviors without changing the conditions, that is just supremacy maintaining. So I would tell anyone, just as I'm saying here, if you want me to change a behavior, then let me see you change the condition or change your behavior as well. I would never ask or assume a young person to do something that I wouldn't be willing or able to do as well. And then I'm gonna end, I had to put these in bullet points because for those of you who know me, I can just keep talking. I also want to just offer that, what is deemed as success in our systems, right? Like, what our health outcomes should be, that they often run counter to what safety means for Black communities, for Brown communities, for minoritized communities, that we actually have to confront that there is actually dissonance between what safety means for us and what success is in the systems that we run, that we get paid by, that we're accountable to or have to be compliant to. And lastly, I'll say we have to absolutely take care of each other. If that's all we do, we have won. And we have to do it righteously in healthy struggle and with towards beloved community. Thank you.
Oh, goodness. Thank you so much. There's just so much to what you said. And I can see people responding on the chat with like the yes. And you're so tweetable too, Conrad Paul, just like these statements that you are making that are just, both mind-blowing and heart-opening at the same time. And what it is kind of bringing up for me, well, first of all, being in relationship, like what an honor it is to have you here today, and how much I want to be in relationship with you and everyone on this, who's speaking today, who's participating today. We're going to learn and grow and change and transform together, being accountable to each other, listening to each other. I know I have a lot to learn, and I have been doing that work, and it's just so needed, ongoing every day for the rest of my life, generations to come, like basically. So thank you so much. And the action that we know we want to take in support of your work and the Rise Youth Center, I think we have a social media message that we want to get out so more folks can learn about your work and get involved in the good hard work that you are describing, that really has the potential to really transform how all of this work happens. So thank you so very much. I want to give a huge thanks to Greg and Sari and Conroe Paul. Thank you for your work, for sharing your work and helping us to get involved in these campaigns, spreading the word about these campaigns, and committing to the kind of long-term learning and engagement that we need to do. So we are going to take a moment now. I want to invite Hannah, who is my dear colleague, to share the screen. We're going to take a look at what's been happening on Twitter. And Sam and Ruben, if you don't mind joining to just share back a little bit about what you have been seeing on Twitter and our other platforms. What's going on?
Yeah, we've been seeing some really cool stuff happen. Kind of following up on Greg's presentation, we had a couple people who say that they had no idea what election monitors and folks like that were and what they did up until hearing this presentation. And a lot of people have said that they've signed up already. So thanks for sharing those links. And then like you said, Lisa, I just know that anytime I'm going to listen to Conroe Paul, I'm going to get a lot of really good sound bites, but they're not just sound bites. There's like substance, like huge substance and huge echoing truths to everything she says. And the important part of that is that she's echoing what the young people at Rise are saying. So, liberation is not a logic model is something that really kind of resonated with folks. That our resilience is the baseline for our communities, is something that's also really resonated with folks, and that white supremacy is the public health challenge that we need to face. So very exciting to hear that this is resonating with folks. Folks, please continue to share your thoughts in the chat box, both here on Zoom and Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube, so that we can hear what's resonating with you and what's working for you through this virtual day of action. And don't forget to take action.
Well, I'm seeing a lot of action being taken. The Twitter feed is quite colorful with photos and posts and links and the hashtag Virtual Action 2020. So thank you all so much for amplifying these messages and getting them out into the world. Look forward to just keeping it going. Let's keep moving. Let's keep posting. Let's keep signing up. Let's keep learning. And I'm just like, let's get it out there. Yeah. To more and more people to get connected and get engaged and work together. So thank you so much for sharing the Twitter feed. That's lovely. And we are going to continue with 2 more speakers. So we are going to continue because we know that organizing around specific campaigns requires, as we've been talking about, infrastructure and real strategy. So next up, I am honored and delighted to invite Quiniqua Carthan Love, Director of Planning and Programs at Cities United, and Brian Malty, Executive Director of the Hope and Heal Fund, the fund to stop gun violence in California, to join me on the virtual stage. Hello, Quiniqua. So lovely to see you. So you have been doing this work. You do this work all day, every day for years, all over the country. And I understand you have recently published a new resource called Reimagining Public Safety. So please tell our participants all about this resource and the main points of this approach.
Yes, hello, Lisa. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here with you all today. This panel has been amazing. This virtual action has been absolutely amazing. I'm pumped if you all are not. As Lisa said, my name is Quiniqua Carthan Love, and I have the privilege of serving as the Director of Planning and Programs at Cities United. Here at Cities United, we're a national network that supports mayors across this beautiful country of ours. Currently have the honor and pleasure of working with 130 cities across this beautiful country. Mm-hmm. And as Lisa said, we recently put out what we call our Reimagining Public Safety call to action. And what this is a framework in which Cities United has really been putting together since our inception in 2011. So it's a compilation of all of our experience, all of the knowledge, the words from our partners, the words from our young leaders as well. And it's really looking at three main points. How do we interrupt the cycle of community violence? That's stopping people from dying today. Right, today, that's looking at street outreach and violence interruption, that's going into hospitals and treating people at their bedsides to say this is a different, you can have a different path, a different journey. And then second, it's dismantling the systems that actually put them there. As a number of people have already said in this wonderful panel, we have to stop the systems that create the conditions for people to die unjustly and preventably today. So that's looking at education. How do we boost education? What does that look like? What does that mean when we center those most impacted by violence? This is looking at how do we work with community members and young people and really engage, not just to show up for a program and be participants, but to own those processes, own the policies, own those programs as well, and to lead it. It's theirs. And in the words of Ricky Aiken out of Inner City Innovators in West Palm Beach, Florida, how do we make sure that those who need it lead it? And that's really what this work is about. And then that third point in our Reimagining Public Safety framework is to invest in the sustainability of all of this great work, not just investing in people's pockets, but actually investing in safe, healthy, and hopeful communities. And that's really it. So if you don't remember anything else, interrupt, dismantle, and invest. Thanks, Lisa.
Beautiful, beautiful. Your organization has been doing more than 130 cities across the country. I know also from doing similar kinds of work, you learn so much through those partnerships. And so I know you just have a wealth of experience and insights on how to move this work forward. Thank you for sharing that resource, which I know is going to be really helpful for folks who are on today who want to get engaged in their community. And there's no reason to start from scratch, to learn from the best who have been making amazing things happen in cities all across the country. So I think we want to, what is the action that you want folks to take right now to help spread the word about this?
Yes, great question. One, download this wonderful resource. Don't just download it and then read it, but also work with those in your community to implement these strategies. There's 15 strategies that you'll find in this document. Please, we encourage you to work with those elected officials, your community-based organizations, and most importantly, your young people to really move these strategies forward. So download, share it, and more importantly, do the work. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. I mean, there's so many people who, like our other speakers have said, have really awakened to this notion of reimagining public safety, right? Like lots of us have been working on it for years, decades. But now, we have this really unique moment to carry forward again on the momentum of so much organizing that's been happening to really make this happen in cities. So folks who are on, please get engaged in your community to reimagine public safety. And thank you for joining Brian. I want to bring you in. You work in California. You're also a longtime leader in gun violence prevention. And I understand that you want to raise the point around smaller towns and cities and rural communities, and how to make sure that we are including and raising up the solutions in those communities on these questions of community and safety and racial justice.
Well, thank you, Lisa. And it's really great to be here with all of you and a lot of my colleagues. Yeah, no, I think it's really important. You know, I can obviously Hope and Heal is a fund here in California, and I can speak a lot to California, but I'm sure it's not unique to California. And, you know, we talk a lot about Chicago and Philadelphia and the Oaklands and South LAs, impacted communities, and working with community-based organizations there. But also, just as importantly, there are small towns, and I'll just speak a little bit to California, in the Central Valley, in the Inland Empire, that maybe aren't connected to a large city and are out on their own. One specific example would be Delano, California, birthplace of the Farm Workers Union, right here in California, very historic. It's a city of about 50,000 people, and it's about, I believe it's about 80% Latino, right? It is off the radar screen of philanthropy. It's off the radar screen from other states and even within the greater county in which it resides. And so my point here is that, you know, one of the things I found when I came to Hope and Heal 4 years ago, that we're adding value in what ways we can to urban violence and those in larger cities. But for us at Hope and Heal Fund, if we are to decrease the rates of gun violence, death, trauma, and injury, we have to be there for all these communities. And Delano is a community, again, that has about it's double like some of the biggest cities' homicides, right? Mm-hmm. So the rate in Delano is outrageous. Yet going there, folks are not, they're not plugged into the greater ecosystem. They're not understanding or don't know about things like hospital-based interventions and other interruption and intervention strategies. And it's our job to help them understand, share best practices, but ultimately, right, every community must decide for themselves what they want, those closest to the problem or closest to the solution. But I just really want to make a plea, not just to focus on some of the big cities, but also smaller towns where a lot of people live and very diverse communities, and sometimes don't have any resources or any infrastructure to speak of. So I think it's important from us at Philanthropy, but also with living in a certain state and other organizations that we pay attention to that.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, and for the work that you're doing, partnering with and organizing and supporting those smaller towns and rural communities, and helping to build those networks. And we should all be a network of networks, right? Like we all have our different partnerships, and by being a network of networks in community working together, we can really make sure that, you know, we are not leaving, you know, any community out, and creating that bigger conversation, and that building greater power together. And we know that, you know, communities are always changing. There's displacement. There's, you know, all kinds of factors that are happening now and that will continue to happen that will shift communities. So the more that we can be, have this broad conversation around community safety, the better. So thank you for bringing that perspective in. And what is the action that you would like folks to take right now, as I'm sure by now everyone is getting really comfortable with the posting and tweeting, and we can probably eager to you know, post again. So what would you like folks to do right now?
Well, I would, ours is actually pretty straightforward and maybe a little bit more generic, but at the hopeandhealfund.org website, we have all kinds of the latest news, strategies, reports, and data on gun violence prevention. And we also just have a resource center for those who want to know more. And I will just throw a little bone to making sure that we all look at gun violence as intersectional. And I think that's some of the resources you can find on Hope and Heal Fund. So that intersectionality, the intimate partner violence, suicide, community violence, all intersected, and there's a lot we can do on that front, but I appreciate the time.
Oh, thank you so much for your work, for your leadership, for joining us today. And I really look forward to continued collaboration and partnership with both of you as individuals and the network. So thank you so very much. We get to hear from two local organizers now. who have been building community safety through racial justice on the ground in their communities through public health community-driven solutions. So I am joined now by Reggie Moore, Director of the Office of Violence Prevention at the Milwaukee Health Department, and Erin Fairchild, Violence Prevention and Intervention Systems Manager with the Multnomah County Department of Public Health. Just wonderful to see you both, and an honor to get to partner with both of you on these really important issues. So thank you for joining. And first off, Erin, would love to hear from you. What is going on in Multnomah County? What are you working on?
Hi, everyone. I just have to say it is such an honor to be here with all these panelists as we're building together to strengthen our collective commitment and action to racial justice as a cornerstone of violence prevention. Many of the panelists I have long admired, and you may not know me, but I've followed your work for a long time, and I turn to you to learn from you. It is our particular joy to share the stage with Reggie Moore. As the Milwaukee Blueprint for Peace that you'll learn about is pretty famous in our health department, and it has served as our blueprint and our inspiration and motivation. So I want to tell you a little bit about something we're working on to kind of think about how we can conceptualize and center racial justice as a form of violence prevention across a fairly large county local government that has multiple departments that engage in violence prevention and intervention work. So currently we are building a framework to shore up how we think about, plan, fund, develop programs and policy across 3 of our major departments in particular. So our health department, our Department of Community Justice, and our Department of County Human Services. We are really facing the truth that can no longer be denied, that really speak to the comments that Conwar Paul shared, that just like many regions, our systems are entrenched in white supremacy. And when we recognize that resilience, as she said, is the baseline for our communities of color, and that white supremacy is the public health crisis. I was clapping behind my mute button, by the way. That those comments and that framework and analysis, in order to challenge those deeply ingrained habits of white supremacy that everyone here is speaking to, we have to be clear, intentional, and devoted in how we shape our work. We have to have a strong analysis, and we have to have accountability to decenter whiteness in our violence prevention strategies. Otherwise, we replicate violence and harm. So with that sort of at the center of our work, we are developing a cross-departmental framework to help us, like I was mentioning, plan, think about, build policy, practice, and funding that's really rooted in public health strategies that truly center community voice and the survivors of those most impacted. The current iteration of our many years worth of work sprung to life when an elder in our community who had been at the center of preventing youth violence for many years, she came to a few of our violence prevention coalitions and said, what are we doing for survivors who are at the intersection of domestic violence and gang violence and sex trafficking? And that question really hit hard. It landed with a lot of our frontline staff and leadership. And in exploring that question, we realized that our approaches have been a little too siloed, and without clear and shared definitions, it becomes difficult to center racial justice. So we are engaged in a cross-departmental collaboration effort with support from Prevention Institute, thank you, to develop a framework tool to help guide how our departments can plan collectively across overlapping risk and protective factors for multiple forms of violence, so that we can guide our investments towards community, particularly towards communities of color, where we know that the most innovative solutions for safety and thriving exist, and trying to decenter white focused strategies along the way. Our framework is built on the analysis of years worth of community and survivor feedback across multiple forms of violence, as well as highlighting and elevating cultural ways of knowing. So we hope it's going to shape our planning for years to come, with a cross-departmental commitment to leading with race and how we plan around violence prevention and intervention. And we believe and hope that by doing this, we can infuse public health approaches far beyond our public health division, especially once everyone's committed to that concept of elevating and centering survivors who are at the intersection of multiple forms of violence.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I hope folks recognize what a privilege it is to hear from someone who's doing this work at a local health department. Erin, I just sort of imagine you as the center of this, with so many relationships in this wheel of transformation where you are connected to and helping, so much through relationship, through connection, through learning, just helping people to think differently, understand differently, and act differently. And I love what you said. I know devotion was, what was the three things? Intention, devotion.
Intention, let's see.
Okay,
Intention, devotion, analysis.
Yeah, all of that every day. I mean, it's sort of like it just brings it down to the brass tacks, and you are there helping this work happen at the local every day. And so thank you for sharing your framework. Some information about that is in the toolkit. So folks who are working at the local level can learn from what you're doing, but that is really intended, as you said, to transform the systems and how they operate and how they build safety across multiple forms of violence. So thank you so much for sharing the work, and also for giving a shout out to Reggie and the Milwaukee Blueprint for Peace. Absolutely warranted a shout out. So Reggie, tell us about the Blueprint and also this moment that you're in right now, because the Blueprint is several years, right, since launch, and this issue of investment, making the strategies come alive through actually changing what we're investing in has really come up as an issue in Milwaukee. So tell us about the Blueprint and what you are trying to make happen in Milwaukee in support of community safety and racial justice.
Cool. Good afternoon. It's definitely an honor and a pleasure to be a part of this conversation with everybody on here and everybody who is tuned in around the country. The Prevention Institute obviously was a very critical partner in the development of our Blueprint, and the kudos definitely goes to our community. One of the things that we are extremely clear about, from the mayor's office to OVP and the health department, this is the people's plan. This is the people's Blueprint. And, Erin, definitely want to underscore the fact that we centered survivors. We centered people closest to the pain to identify the priorities, not only for the Office of Violence Prevention, but for violence prevention in our city. And one of the things that was very clear from the very first meeting, there were two things that stood out. Number one, in a city that's ranked one of the most segregated cities in the country, and has unfortunately also been ranked one of the worst places to raise a Black child, that this Blueprint could not just deal with community and interpersonal violence, but had to deal with structural and systemic violence. And so when you look at the principles of the Blueprint, equity is centered in that process, and understanding that violence impacts different communities differently. So when we look at intimate partner violence and domestic violence, we see a disparity in the amount of women who are victimized in our transgender and LGBTQ family, who's also impacted disproportionately by these issues. And gun violence is a part of that. And so we can't look at these things in isolation. The other thing that the community was extremely clear about is that when we talk about resilience, I love what was mentioned earlier about resilience being the baseline, is that this Blueprint or this plan can't be about making us comfortable in our pain. And so when we talk a lot about trauma-informed care in this community, the question that's centered in that process is what happened to you instead of what's wrong with you. At the end of the day, we also have to ask the question, who did it and why does it keep happening? We also use the analogy about looking upstream and questioning the babies that are falling in the river, instead of just pulling them out, actually going upstream to see. But if all the babies who are falling in that river have on purple t-shirts or purple onesies, that's something that we need to pay attention to. So when we look at gun violence in particular, and the disparity in terms of who's impacted and who's victimized, in terms of Black and Latino men in particular, this is a slow daily genocide. And this is something that we have to look at from a racial justice lens and a human rights lens. And unfortunately, Wisconsin has the second highest Black homicide victimization rate in the country, based on a study by the Violence Policy Center. And so as we talk about racial disparities, and I know that Robin Voss has formed a task force at the state level to look at racial disparities, particularly as it relates to police reform and public safety, we have to understand that gun violence is a part of that. And unfortunately, as a state, we don't have a solid track record on taking gun violence seriously and addressing it seriously. And so one of the things that we're calling on this task force to do, which I think their first meeting is this Wednesday, is basically to look at establishing a statewide violence prevention fund with at least $25 million to support community-based strategies for violence prevention. The plan may be amazing on paper, but it means nothing if there's not the political will and investment to make it happen. And that's what we've been fighting for, not just at a local level, but also on Capitol Hill and also at a state level. And so again, we need everybody to again, look at the intersection of racism and look at racial justice and look at gun violence as a racial justice and human rights issue and demand that the political will, investment, and policies are put behind it and to ensure that we can make our communities safer.
So this meeting you're talking about is happening this week. Is that correct?
Correct, that is my understanding.
Okay, so and we have a very carefully composed tweet message directed at the key folks who really need to hear from this community right now about how important this fund would be. So we have another action in support of what you're talking about in Wisconsin. So tell us about this message and so folks understand why it's so important and what you're trying to communicate.
Right, we're basically calling on Representative Stubbs and Steinke and others who are part of this task force to establish and support the establishment of a $25 million violence prevention fund. In the bills that Evers have proposed around police accountability, there was $1 million proposed as a part of his police reform package. So this task force is basically charged with not only looking at those original proposals, but also another series of proposals that I believe were introduced by Representative Wangard. And so at the end of the day, when we talk about trying to look at the production of public safety in our community beyond policing, we have to understand that we have to also invest in violence prevention. And we can't expect for community partners or nonprofits or grassroots folks to do the same amount of work on a $5 budget. We have to invest equitably, and that's what's been missing, not only on a local level, but on a national level. And unfortunately, at this point right now, we have 107% higher homicides this year, and Milwaukee's not alone when we look at gun violence homicides. And so I believe we've, as of today, surpassed the historic gun violence homicide numbers that we saw back in the 90s at the height of the crack epidemic and the war on drugs in our city. And so at the end of the day, we can't continue failed policies and failed practices to deal with the pain that people are experiencing that has been exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. And we've, quite frankly, ignored the gun violence pandemic that has been ravaging our cities and our communities on an annual basis.
Just unconscionable, really, to not address what's happening and to not invest in solutions that we know work. So what an important opportunity it is right now to get behind this effort in Wisconsin as a community committed to community safety and racial justice and violence prevention, to show our support, our belief in the need for investing in these solutions that we know work, will save lives, and are the right thing to do. So please, everyone who's participating, go ahead and put that message out into your networks, out into these policymakers who need to hear from this community how much we believe in the importance of this fund, the creation of this fund, and the solutions that we know work. So thank you so much, Reggie and Aaron. And we just appreciate the work that you do every day, the love, the strategy, the organizing that you make happen every day. And again, look forward to continued partnerships. And once again, just please tweet that message out, and we'll keep, beyond this hour and a half, we'll keep sharing that message out, Reggie, how important it is for the Wisconsin policymakers to take action. I have been getting messages that we've got some more people signing up to be poll monitors, to do phone banking, and that some comments are being made on Facebook and other platforms. So I want to invite Sam to come on now and just share a little bit about what has been going on. What are you seeing? What's happening out there?
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, there's a lot of energy. There's a lot of urgency based on after what Reggie and Erin just shared. A lot of tweeting and posting on Facebook and Instagram. We have some comments on Twitter. Somebody said they didn't realize how much public health, how much they missed public health until they joined this event this afternoon. You work in public health because you care about people in their lives, and it shines through in everything you say and do. And then we have somebody else say that I'm a longtime public health advocate and I'm running to be county commissioner, specifically to bring a public health equity framework to local policymaking in Lane County, Oregon. Thanks for this great event. So people are really enjoying the event. It's very powerful and moving.
Great. Thank you so much. Really, really glad. I know I'm feeling super energized, and a lot has been happening over the last hour and 15 minutes. And we are, I want to just bring in the last couple speakers. What an incredible hour plus it's been. We've heard from amazing organizers working to get out the vote, to pass specific policy, to change the way we think and act and are in relationship with each other in urban, suburban, and rural communities across the country, to implement long-term blueprints and coordinated action, always emphasizing community leadership, especially Black and Brown leaders and Black and Brown led organizations. Hopefully folks have signed up to volunteer, have flexed their social media muscles, and have learned and felt that you are more connected to this movement, to this moment, incredibly powerful moment of reimagining public safety, community safety through racial justice. So in our final segment, bringing back Dr. Howard Pinderhughes, and also joined by Chrissy Giuliano, who is the Executive Director of the Big Cities Health Coalition. And we're going to have some final words to contextualize this work in terms of long-term considerations and recommendations, including in the context of COVID ongoing and COVID recovery ongoing. If Chrissy, I think you may not be joining by video, but if you are on by phone, I wanted to ask you to, well, first of all, just acknowledge that you represent or work with America's largest metropolitan health departments to jointly address issues affecting nearly 62 million people. That is incredible. So please share from your perspective, what are some of the long-term considerations and recommendations for community safety through racial justice, including in the context of COVID recovery?
Hey, Lisa, hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I wish I could be on the screen, but unfortunately, I am in transit. You know, this whole panel is a really tough act to follow, particularly Reggie and Erin. You know, as Lisa said, I work with 30 big city health departments. And when I hear about what goes on at the local level, it both makes me feel like my job is unimportant and super important at the same time, because the folks who are really doing this work on the ground, you know, really are in the midst of so much right now. And so I really want to recognize that. I also want to go back to where this whole conversation started, talking about voting. You know, it is critical that we as leaders in public health vote up and down the ballot, particularly in cities and counties across the country. Small or large, local elections have real impact on people's lives, sometimes more so than obviously at the federal level. And I would also say that after we vote, we need to both hold our elected leaders accountable and also recognize the important work that their colleagues across governments do. So, you know, I work with local health departments, as Lisa said, and right now in the midst of COVID, you know, many local and state health officials are just getting beat up around the country for doing nothing more than trying to keep people healthy and safe. So, we need to support elected officials, but we also need to support all that critical leadership that happens in health and other agencies across different levels of government. Second, I think we've heard a lot of local examples of how we need to move the needle on racial justice and preventing violence and other challenges in our communities by building more resilient communities. And this is a place where, as a field, public health can really make a difference. As I said, so many examples locally and, also in Big Cities Health Coalition cities. And we need to make sure that we lift up that work, learn from each other, and not reinvent the wheel. So, no one has any resources to waste, whether it's time or money, and, really sharing that and learning that across the field is critically important. So one of the things that the Big Cities Health Coalition, BCHC, has been working on with Lisa and her team is a framework around preventing violence in not just our member cities, but, across the country. And there are some examples of work that's going on. And we're going to release that report in the next couple of weeks. There's a preview in another report that's on our website, which is policy recommendations for a new administration. But in there is a picture of the framework that we've been working on. And we are hopeful that it's a really useful and living and breathing document as a way to support work that's going on in communities across the country. Again, not just for our members, but for everybody who has these challenges. And we're also we tried really hard, and thanks to Lisa's team, for it not to just be about preventing violence, but thinking about all the other pieces in the puzzle as we build these resilient communities. So, we'll be back in touch with everybody when that report comes out. Lisa talked about COVID and really thinking about putting all of this in the COVID context. And as awkward as this is to say, we have a real opportunity to think about the impact of COVID and how we can change the way we do things. We really are going to have to rebuild a lot of communities, particularly communities of color that have been hit much harder with both cases and unfortunately with deaths in this pandemic. And, in some ways, it's become a really concrete illustration of what so many of us knew about health disparities and about how policies and systems affect people differently. And so, again, I hate to say it this way, but there really is an opportunity to educate others and make sure that as we rebuild communities, we do so in more equitable ways and really, make sure that systems work for everyone, not, just some of us or few of us. And so, the last thing I would say, and this is part of our action item, is that the Big Cities Health Coalition has put together a report that are some policy recommendations to think about around COVID, but then also the issues that are affecting many of our communities, our member communities, pre-COVID and continuing through COVID, and of course will also be post-COVID, which is, racism, violence in our communities, substance use disorder, and really thinking about how the federal government can work with local and state government and elected and health officials to make sure that, again, these policies and systems and best practices are in place to be able to build more resilient communities, not just the work that the health department does, but obviously community partners and across the whole of government, whether that's the local, state, or federal government. So this has been, as I said, such a great conversation. And, I hope that sort of bringing up some of these national level issues has helped contextualize it. But thank you so much. It was really great to be part of this conversation.
And thank you, Chrissy, for all the work that you do and our partnership as well. And it's so important in this moment to really seize this as an opportunity to lift up the importance of our public health infrastructure. And yeah, I mean, I'm so proud to be part of this field and grateful for the work that you do across the country with just some amazing brave, brilliant public health leaders. So I look forward to looking at that transitions document that you have put together. And thank you for raising these issues around community safety and racial justice as important issues for the next administration. We have a couple minutes left in our panel, and actually this is impromptu, but I want to invite all of our panelists, all of our speakers to put their video back on so we can all be together. And we also have a question that one of our participants has posed, specifically related to the increase in gun sales. The person says, I keep hearing that during the pandemic, gun sales are going way up. Any suggestions for mitigating those fears and offering something better? Also another comment on Twitter. I've been on a million webinars since mid-March. Today's APHA Virtual Action 2020 has been the best and most inspiring by far. There's so much work to do, but so nice to be reminded of how many of us are out there and dedicated to getting the work done. So thank you for that comment and thank you for that question. And would love to hear if anybody wants to respond specifically to the question around increase in gun sales. And then we'll turn it over to Howard, who helped us to launch this conversation, for a few final words. But any comments about this issue of gun sales? Anyone
This is
want to
Reggie.
take that? Yeah.
I'll just briefly say, I mean, in Wisconsin, we definitely saw a spike in background checks for gun sales. And personally, I know a lot of people who actually purchased their first firearm. And I think a lot of it was driven by fear and, you know, fear that it was going to be pandemonium and people just being, you know, afraid. And when we look at the connection between fear, scarcity, all of the things that we know create unsafe communities, you know, people think that a gun is actually going to protect them or make them safe. And we understand, even when we look at, and I think the Joyce Foundation have funded a study when they looked at, you know, young people in Chicago, many of them who carried firearms weren't, you know, to commit an offense. It was because they were afraid. And so we really have to look at the importance of creating safe communities. And it's not just the absence of violence, it has to be the presence of opportunity.
Lisa,
Perfect.
could I jump in there too?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Reggie. I totally agree with that. And in California, some of you may have seen, just as the last couple of weeks, a new study by University of California, Davis, that showed in California that in a period during COVID, 110,000 new guns were sold. About 47,000 of those, or 42%, are first-time buyers, right? And that has and we'll find out at some point exactly, at least in California, because we have that kind of information, the racial breakup, geography, and all of that. But it does really present a very big risk to a lot of families, because you may not know how to store your gun safely. That gun in the home can be used against a partner, against your children, against yourself. And it's really important that when folks, before they bring a gun into the home, understand that. But the fact is that at least in California, I'm sure it's across the country, there are a lot of new gun buyers across the country. And again, to Reggie's point too, is, you know, when the pandemic's over, some of those folks may not want that gun anymore, and those guns wind up on our streets and way too easily accessible to far too many people.
We've got a lot of work to do. Thank you, Brian. Thank you all so much. It's lovely to see all your faces here. It's been an amazing event. Howard, any concluding thoughts you want to share as we wrap up our time together today?
Well, a few. In regards to the last question, we all know that we're living in a time where fear has been stoked by tremendous ideology, and what we've got now is a triple epidemic, a triple pandemic. We've got COVID, we all know about that. We've got racial violence and white supremacy, we all know about that. We also have economic disaster and depression. And the confluence of that means that so many people are feeling uncertain, unstable, and scared. And the antidote to that is hope, connection, and movement building. And that's what this gathering has been about. This gathering has been about providing a window, an image, an idea of how we move forward. And that piece, I think, that's the answer to that question, is to do the work that we do, double down on the work that we do. And I have no doubt that none of you all are going to rest between now and November 3rd. And we're certainly not going to rest until after that. But I do want to say, I am humbled by the folks who you've assembled to talk today. And I am uplifted by the work you all do. It's all truly, truly amazing. And when we talk about this vision of transformative change, of social change, we're talking about systems change, we're talking about institutional change, we're talking about cultural change. There's a multitude of types of change that we are trying to enact. But I want you to pause for a second and think about how far we've actually come. It's hard to see that when you look at that fool in the White House. But when I think about the language that we use and the narrative that we have advanced today, resilience as a baseline, Kanwa Paul, that's what you said. I can remember when the idea of resilience was a revolutionary idea that we were trying to promote and put. Now we're talking about, no, that's the baseline. We have to move beyond that. And I got, one of the places I got that from was when we were in Milwaukee, Reggie, and we were talking to the community about trying to develop a violence prevention plan. And they were talking about resilience. Why are you talking about resilience? You're just talking about making us comfortable with the oppression. And they were right. And so that's part of the point. We've moved from there to, and again, I'm going to reference UConn, white supremacy as a public health challenge. I can remember just a few years ago, white supremacy as a concept was a third rail. We couldn't go there. We didn't go there. Only the most radical among us would go there. And now we are talking about that as the public health challenge. And I think that that's something that we need to pick up and advance, that concept, because I think it's core to the work that we need to do.
Thank you, Howard.
I know, it's time.
I know, I wish we could stay.
And
Amy,
the last thing I'm going to say,
yes.
is we need to move from fight the power to seize the power. Go, it's on you.
Love it.
All right.
Well,
Well,
I feel powerful.
that. But I'll just wrap us up. I'm going to wrap up this particularly inspiring and energizing APHA Day of Action. I think we all needed this in this moment with these urgent crises, this triple pandemic, as Howard just said. I want to thank the Prevention Institute, Lisa, Ruben, the entire Prevention Institute team. Thank you also to our inspiring speakers, and all the dedicated volunteers who made today happen. A special thanks to the CHPPD section of APHA for their support every year for this collaborative and important event. Thank you to all of our co-sponsors listed on the event website. And a special thanks to all of you who joined us here today and brought your commitment to these urgent issues and your energy for making the transformative and collective change needed to create safer communities and racial justice. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
We'll see you soon. We'll talk to you soon.
Peace and power.
Take good care. Bye.